Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Hey, today we have with us a couple authors of the upcoming book called Persistence, Lessons from Chiefs, Empowering You to Move from Success to Significance as a Transformational Leader. Lefford Fate and Ericka Kelly, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hey. Hello,
Hey
Mike.
guys,
Hello.
so I'm really excited to talk about this book because I love when you get these empowering words. You know, a certain word will resonate with you, and it's like, persistence. And you just hear all these examples and stories and self-help and personal development books about these words. And I love persistence, but then your subtitle, everyone wants to learn a little lesson, so that's really good. And everyone wants to feel empowered. So empowering you to move from success to significance. And I really just love how you're setting the stage. So I'm excited to dive into what this book will be. But give us a little bit of background on each of you, and then what made you come to the point to think, there's a book on this topic here, and you want to put this together.
Go ahead, Ericka. You be first, my friend.
Thank you, Lefford. Mike, it is really nice to be here with you, be here with my partner, Lefford. My background is very simple, and that is that I am an immigrant from Central America. I came to the States when I was 12 years old, joined the military when I was 22. And I am giving you little blocks of timeline, but as you can imagine, there was a lot of details into those or in between those steps. And I spent over 32 years in the military. And in those 32 years, persistence was one of those words that kept me going. And it's not the word itself, it's just the actions in my career that kept me going.
Before Lefford, I get your background, I'd like to ask this quick question to Ericka. The old phrase, hindsight is 2020. So you can easily now say persistence in my career, right? Well, I was wondering while you were mentioning that, did you feel like during your 30 plus year career in the military, did you feel like persistence was one of those traits that you were noticing in your career? Or did it happen afterwards and you look back and said, what was one of the key words that I could attribute to my career? Oh, persistence. Or did you see that as you were going through?
Little pieces, Mike, little pieces. But as you can see, the subtitle of the book has the word lessons. So yes, a lot of the things that, from my perspective anyway, is looking back and realizing that sometimes the toughest times in my military career were little pieces of persistence, were little pieces of just keep pushing forward and just dig until you find the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah, I love it because sometimes the whole picture doesn't reveal itself as we're going through it. Sometimes we just say, you know what, one more step, one foot in front of the other. And then you get a glimpse of that bigger picture, but it's a little fuzzy, and then you get a little closer. But if all you do is focus on that next step, you can persist. So I really love that. Lefford, give us a little background on yourself and what led you to then partner up with Ericka and bring this book into existence.
Well, it's close to the same but different. I joined the military right out of high school. I grew up in a small town, didn't have a whole bunch, and I thought I was going to get a scholarship for either sports or a scholarship academic, and I wasn't good enough, right? I just flat off wasn't good enough and didn't know how to go get things. And so the Air Force was a great way of life for me. And I spent just under 31 years in the United States Air Force, probably one of the greatest things that ever could have happened to me. And just listening to that question, I think I recognize persistence more after the fact than it was a plan. I knew to work hard. I knew that it was a struggle, but there were times I didn't know I was persistent. I just know that if I was going to be successful, I had to keep going. And so that's kind of how I did that. And again, I went from my dad's house to Uncle Sam's house, did 31 years. And it was a great opportunity. I met a lot of people and grew a lot through that process.
And then at some point, when you can now say that part of my life is in the rear view mirror. So now you come to the point where it's like, you know what? There's a lot of lessons built up in our careers. And there's a book in this. And here's the word that we want to focus on because it was so pivotal in our careers. At what point did you guys think, you know what, let's come together and then let's put a book together like this that are lessons from Chiefs?
Well, Eric and I were talking because we're doing a lot working with veterans and helping them transition. We're both people that are John Maxwell team leaders that are out there trying to make the world a better place. And because we have similar backgrounds in the military, and we see that there are people that are struggling, and they see us where we are, and Ericka can talk to this. A lot of people see you where you are. They see the stripes, they see the position, they see that, and they say, wow, it must have been easy. And it was far from that. We had to go through a lot to get where we are. And in order to be significant, not just successful, you got to reach back and help other people. And both of us, I think, have a passion to help others make their path, not just follow us, but we can give them some tools and techniques so they can be successful and significant in their own right.
It made me think of the phrase, the overnight success. Oh, you look at someone's life and all of a sudden they get this thing and it's like, oh, they're the overnight. Yeah, it took me 30 years to get to that one moment in time where I could be that overnight success. So thanks for noticing. But yeah, I put in my dues. So yeah, Ericka, go ahead.
No, I was just going to share that my career definitely pivoted when I realized that it was okay to tell my story. That it was okay for me to showcase the journey and not just be superficial. And, I guess a little bit of shameful confession here. I was a little bit superficial because I was afraid and I was ashamed. And I wanted to cover up the poverty. I wanted to cover up the homelessness. I wanted to cover up the abuse. And I wanted to present myself as this shiny airman that had not made any mistakes in life. And I would say, okay, at pretending, but nothing can replace the truth. And once I started taking my mask off and being authentic and being transparent with my story, is when then I saw that success that Lefford was mentioning, but even more so that significance in others' lives, because now I was connecting with people. And then, and Lefford and I talk about this all the time, Mike, then I could see the transformation in my heart.
Okay, so that brings up a question. And before we get into the book and the content, this is really great introduction because it lays the groundwork of why. Well, you're talking about a mask and you're talking about being transparent and authentic, and you were afraid at a point in your career. So I think that some people like Lefford were saying like, oh, on the outside, he looks like, she looks like, well, you're saying I needed to be more transparent, but what would you say to a current airman or someone looking on the front end? Because it's easy for you to say, let me now tell my story when I've got 30 years in the rear view. What about someone on the front end going, yeah, but I'm on the early part of my career. What if that causes this, or what if that keeps me from? I think that there's some really real feelings that, yeah, we all hear that being authentic is so important, but could there be an encouragement for someone to take your piece of the story here and go, how can I apply that to my life? Because I'm just starting my 30 years.
Mike, easy. I'm not telling my story now. I learned that in my journey as an airman.
Perfect.
And I was put in a spot where someone said, we heard this about you. Can you tell us about it? And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely.
Oh,
not.
nice. Okay. Right? I see where you're going. Good.
And And then they're like, no, you need to tell your story. And I ended up telling my story, which was very difficult, in front of chiefs and colonels
Wow.
and the leadership of a wing. And I realized, this is what I realized, Mike and Lefford. I realized that when I was done being authentic for the first time, I think in a very long time, I had people coming to me, whispering in my ear, giving me a hug and whispering, saying, me too. I'm in the same
Wow.
situation. Thank you. And then that was the first time that I realized that I needed to connect different.
Yep.
And we're talking about persistence, right? And what my persistence also included taking care of people. And I realized that my discomfort was just that, my discomfort. But the message that I brought could help others.
And you were persistently keeping that mask on in years past. And now the encouragement to you at that point was, I need to persistently keep the mask off. And your discomfort was like pulling a Band-Aid off. It wasn't fun, but as soon as it came off, you're like, oh, wasn't that bad? And if you saw these glimmers of hope of other airmen and people around you that were going, me too, thank you. Now, guess what? That gives you that little lift in your step to continue being persistently authentic and transparent, and that can then be that that catalyst in for someone in their life, which the word you're using is transform, helping someone transform their life and career because they saw you as the trailblazer. You know, they're like, oh, if Ericka can do it, I could do it. That gives me some encouragement. So that's really a neat insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And as I listen to that, Ericka, because like I said, I'm one of Ericka's biggest fans, to be quite honest. And I remember, Mike, when I was talking about doing this project with somebody, I wanted it to be someone like Ericka. But I remember on many occasions I was a mental health professional in the military, and I was as a senior enlisted leader, I was talking to these people that were going through things, and they were basically not doing very well. And because they weren't doing very well, they were ready to give up. And until I started telling parts of my story that, I used to get in trouble. I used to, especially when I lost my mother, there were so many things that went on. And and if it wasn't for other people coming into my life and giving me some encouragement, I would have given up and quit. And I couldn't go there. So there's so many people in the Air Force today that if they knew that they had this was just a time and it was going to pass, if they were persistent and they didn't give up and they had faith in themselves and the operation of the Air Force, that they can go and do way better than they're doing. So this is a message that I think is hugely important for people in our military today, because a lot of our military people are in struggle, Mike. I mean, they're amazing people, but there's a lot of stuff going on. And if we can give them something to hold on to, I think that we can be of service to our people.
Well, I think that we can all think of an example or a moment in our own life or an example in someone we've heard where it's like that one comment, that one conversation, that one meeting that made all the difference in the world in someone's life. And this message in this book is on persistence, has that capability. And the thing that I love what you're doing is it's not just a book about the word persistence, because that'd be a chapter and a half, right? Never give up, be persistent. Okay, got it. But you guys are taking this really deeply, and you're taking each one of the letters in the word persistence and you've assigned a character trait for each letter. Give us a little overview of what each one of these character traits and these words mean for the word persistence.
Okay. And I'll go ahead and do that. Um, the words, we sat down and talked about persistence, and we did an acrostic. Is passion. E is excellent. R is resiliency. S is significance. I is identity. S is for service. T is for transformation. E is for enthusiasm. N is for noble. C is for compassionate. And E is an encourager. And what we did was we reached out to chief master sergeants that we know, respect, and love that had these attributes. And we wanted to find out how they use these letters in their life, in their career, with the lens of persistence to get to where they are now. Because as I always say, Mike, one of us is never as smart as all of us. And all of us have a different story. And we wanted to have it where it looked like you. It could be a male, female. It can be a maintainer, a medic. It could be Hispanic, black, white. It could be different people who could speak to different people about what it took, because all of us have a story, but all of us don't connect to everybody's story. We wanted to have this process for anybody that is gonna serve or has served, so we can help them not only be successful but significant.
Well, the thing that I like about when I hear those words, for the word persistence, it feels like they're not randomly selected words that are nice sound bites and buzzworthy. They have this common thread through each one of them, which is that persistence. So I love what you've done with the concept of what makes success and transformation persistence. What does each letter stand for? And I'm excited to get to read this book from not just one or two people's opinions, Lefford and Ericka, but wow, decorated military leaders, chief master sergeants about this word, So I just think that's just spectacular. Give us a little background when you're thinking of back in your career. Sometimes it's easy, the old saying is the cobbler's kids' shoes are always the one in need of repair. But oh wow, you go to the cobbler and you get your shoes fixed, or the plumber's house. There's always the one with the leaky faucet, but they can fix your faucet. Well, what do you say to someone that goes, okay, well, I know all about this persistence and I need to teach people about it. What in your own personal lives do you find is so difficult in applying persistence when you're talking personally and professionally in your careers?
Mike, let me just jump in on this one right now, because I want to go back a little bit to the word persistence and why the specific words that we selected for the acronym. And that is because persistence has brothers and sisters. And if you don't have, right, if you don't have passion, if you don't have an identity of knowing who you are and where you're going, if you're not compassionate, if you don't have courage, that persistence, it's not going to be as strong. So you said that each word meant something. Each word does mean something because it makes persistence, right, that much stronger. So when we're talking about our careers, and sometimes we are looking on the other side and we're looking at someone else's career, I think that what this book is going to showcase, it's not Lefford and I letting you know that the story has a good ending. It's going to showcase that it's a group of individuals with different personalities, different backgrounds. Air Force, yes. Chiefs, yes. But every single one of us has had a different journey. And every single person is going to give the reader, your audience, a completely different point of view from their perspective. And together, that's where the magic is, Mike. It's not because Lefford and I are retired chiefs. I would like to think that. But the magic is between all of those chiefs, all of us together, sharing our perspectives of the good, the bad, and the ugly in our careers, in our personal lives, in order to make us the person that we are today, in order for us to then give a lesson to someone, for them to maybe speed up the process and not have to make the same, I don't want to call them mistakes, but life lessons, right? If they can speed up that process.
Well, you know what I've heard this said too. Is like, Lord, remove this bad thing from my life. Well, maybe it's not a matter of getting it removed from your life. Maybe it's a matter of you need to get stronger to get through it. So yeah, to your point, Erica, it is not necessarily to avoid certain mistakes. Maybe sometimes there will be, but maybe learning these lessons will help you be stronger so that when you get to that same hurdle that Chief so and so is speaking about, that you know exactly how to get through it, because you're not going to get around it, over it, under it. You need to get through it. Well, boy, that thing that I learned from helped me to bolster my confidence. So I think that's a big thing that people need to realize is many times in life and career, we're not going to avoid and have this nice soft path of green grass and birds chirping. Sometimes it's going to be down and dirty, but if I know that I could get through it because this person did and Lefford said I could and Ericka said I could, man, I can as well.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes you can see, sometimes when I read or watch a show or I listen to a podcast, Mike, I said, okay, I'm not a loser. They did it and they went through it. And it's okay to go through stuff, because some of the things that we say in our own mind, Mike, will turn us off. And we had two interviews recently from great men, great leaders. One was the Chief Master Sergeant Rob McKinley, the 15th Chief Master Sergeant Air Force, and one was a good friend of mine who's the 20th Fighterman Command Chief. That if you look at them now, you would think they never had any adversity in defeat. But what they did, they went through some tough stuff and they came out on the other side better. And they talked about some life lessons that anybody can take. Anybody can take these lessons and do amazing things. So I'm excited to be able to share with these great people what's going on.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned perspective, both of you did a couple times, and it makes me think of a story example of this person that was so distraught in their life, thinking all was lost, that they go to this counselor for help. And it's like, I'm at wit's end. I'm at my end of my rope, and here's all these things, and I can't believe. And the counselor's listen and taking some notes, and he goes, well, first, before I respond to that, I just want to tell you how sorry I am about the loss of your wife. And he's like, what are you talking about? My wife is just fine. Oh, okay. Well, I just want to tell you how sorry I am about your house that burned down. He's like, what? My house is great. I live in a wonderful house. Well, and he kept listing all these things. I'm so sorry to hear. And he's like, what are you doing? Because I've got, and he goes, let me just explain to you something. You have all of these major great things in your life, assets. And now let's balance that with what you're talking about. Does that now help get perspective on what you came in to talk about? And now this person's going, you know, I am overlooking the things I should be grateful for. So many times that what you're talking about in someone's career in the military, let's say, you're going to come across this hurdle and it's going to seem overwhelming. But when you can realize that other people, these chief master sergeants and other airmen have gone through worse, it's going to give you that perspective that, okay, it's hard, but it's not going to conquer you.
Right. I'm going to use that story. I like that.
Okay.
Mike, one of the things that we also need to be aware of is, and Lefford has mentioned it a couple of times, and that is that there are not just airmen, but people in general trying to find a path in their lives. And I don't know if people are overlooking this, but in 4.5, maybe 5 years, the workforce, and I'm assuming in the military, 75% of that workforce is going to be millennial. And that is a completely different generation. And Lefford and I, as we were getting ready to write this book and ready to do this amazing project, we were also talking about the different generations in the workforce. And that we came up with five generations right now, Lefford, and that need to communicate, that need to connect, that need to understand that what's going to drive one generation, if we can just be general as such, is not the same as the other. So that's going to be also very impactful. The chiefs that we have selected for this book are from those generations, which is pretty amazing.
That's a really big big point, big perspective in the workforce. You know, you get someone in millennial talking to a boomer, talking to a Gen X, and you can say one phrase, one word, one concept, and it might mean different things to all of them. So how can you have that recurring theme, that thread that everyone just gets it? So that's a really big undertaking. That's a really good observation.
And there's some very powerful traditionalists also in corporate America globally, and sometimes as advisors in the military. So, yeah.
Well, I know that both of you are studied in the area of personal development, and I'm confident that you can attribute this next concept to many people, the Jim Rohns of the world, or Zig Ziglars. But it's been said many times. Even I'm confident Napoleon Hill as well. Work harder on yourself in personal development than you do in your career. And I would say that before you can be an effective leader and leading people in let's say the concept of persistence, you need to personally apply it to yourself and have self leadership. What are you guys finding in your own career, personally and professionally, where persistence, there's a couple key takeaways that you're going, you know what, before I can tell people under my command about persistence, I needed to learn this. I need to apply this.
Well, basically, it's you got to lead yourself first. You got to lead yourself first, and you got to be persistent and not give up. There's a couple of quotes that I normally talk about that, persistence is key. 3 P's: persistence, passion, and perspiration. And you got to keep going. And if it's very hard to tell somebody else to stick to it and to be persistent if you give up consistently and constantly. So for me, I had to grind to keep going through some pretty horrific things. And just to go back, one of the reasons that I picked one, or I wanted to pick one person in particular to be a part of this project, John Gunther. And Mike, you've heard me talk about John Dwayne Gunther forever, that at a time in my life that I was ready to give up. I was ready to quit because I lost my mother and my son was born, and I was at the verge of doing some crazy stuff. And he helped me to hang on. Sometimes you're the catcher and sometimes you're the caught. And there was a time in my life that John Gunther was the catcher, and he caught me before I went too far, and he turned me around. And so it's not only just to be persistent, to put systems in place or people around you that can help you be persistent. Does that make sense? That hey, yeah, knucklehead, or hey, honey, or hey, son, or hey, old, you got this. And that's one of the things that I think this project is going to do for many, many, many people.
Yes, really good point. Ericka, what are your thoughts?
Well, for me, Mike, the biggest point is that amazing men and women have helped me. If it wasn't for those men and women, I would have not received the opportunities that I can brag about now. Where did persistence come from my side was to take the challenge. Because for me, the biggest fight was the self-judging voice that I had in my head that would say to me, not you. What are you thinking? Seriously, you think you can do what? And if I allowed that voice to be louder than the voices around me that would say, you have potential, we believe in you, we want to give you a chance, then Mike, I think I would have not be in this room with you today, not be a partner with Lefford in this endeavor. So if I was, and this is why I think this conversation is so important, because people need to understand that every single one of us has that voice.
Yeah.
And what I would ask people is not to feed it.
Yeah.
not to feed it. And if, even though you're persistent, but let's say there's a little bit of gap in the opportunity that's being offered to you, believe in the person that sees your potential before you can see it. And trust them. Hold on to their hand, right? Lefford and I always talk about proximity and modeling. Have proximity to the people you want to be like, and model what they do. And then that will then make that journey of yours easy. Maybe not.
Nope.
Easier,
but doable. Yeah, easier. Easy, no, easier, yes. So I want to ask, in the face of an obstacle, what gives you persistence? But I want to frame it with this concept. In marketing, there's this thing called push and pull marketing. Push is buy now, scarcity, deadline, buy, and it's like in your face, push. Pull marketing is teaching someone about a concept, helping them understand why it's important to them, giving them the pros and the cons, and having them to come to the realization, yes, I need this, and you're the one to provide it for me. So push and pull. Well, in the world of persistence, and like motivating the troop, so to speak, or your team, you could be pushy and you're going to have a little bit of pushback, or you can reward good behavior. And I know in the military, we're not talking about how to lead, but in human development, this is something that's really important. There's a book called Whale Done, WHALE, not well done, but whale done. And it's a fictional story kind of a book, but it's really neat because it's this guy goes down to SeaWorld where they're having Shamu, and he goes up and talks to the trainer, and he goes, how do you get that big old whale to do all these tricks? Do you zap them? And he goes, no. What we do is we teach him how to do this one thing we want the whale to do, and then we reward him as soon as he does that thing. And he wants to do it again and wants to do it again. We reward good behavior. So yes, there's a time for, let's discipline bad behavior, but there should be that positive reinforcement and that pull. So with that thought in mind, when you guys in your careers faced an obstacle and the decision is, oh, you can't do that, or I can do this, right? What was it that gave you that push to push through that obstacle in the light of being persistent? What did you have something going on the back of your head, like, well, this person did it, I can do it, or I can push through? What was it that kind of gave you that fire?
Go ahead, Lefford.
Well, don't judge me too harshly, but there are a couple of things. And Mike knows I'm always a couple of thing guys. I've had the push and I've had the pull. There's been some pulls to me where I actually had somebody that was a leader that wasn't a very good leader, and I figured that I needed to study and learn and grow to get from under this particular person. And that was my little bit of Jim Rohn would say, you got to have a little bit of revenge in your life. But for that, I was like, what I saw wasn't something that I wanted to emulate. I didn't think it was positive, and I thought I needed to get there. And I also said I will never do people like that. But then I had some people in my life that were they had their self so together that I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be like John Gunther. I wanted to be like Lieutenant Colonel Dickerson. I wanted to be like a Chief Master Sergeant Barnes. I wanted to be somebody that made an impact, and I didn't want to be like somebody that wasn't making an impact. So there was push and pull in my life, not just one thing.
And I think for me too, Lefford and Mike, that give and take. This is what I have learned. I have done very well when I feel valued, when I feel safe, and when I feel included. So that's one of the things that when I talk to leadership, when I talk to people, I have understood very clearly that if the people that you're leading or the people that are leading you don't understand those three things, then there's going to be a disconnect when it comes to that well-oiled machine, either corporate or military, that needs to move forward. Every single person in the organization needs to feel valued, safe, and included. And if that's the case, then persistence becomes just an anchor to not let go. I'll give you an example. If you were my supervisor, if Lefford was my commander, and the two of you believed in me so much, and I felt valued, I felt safe, and I felt included in the team with the two of you, my persistence was to not let you down. My persistence was to prove you right. And the Air Force saved my life, Mike. The Air Force literally saved my life. And when I say that first day in basic training that I'm staring at that metal bed, thanking God that I am not, I could see that MTI going up and down. And I'm thanking God that he's only screaming and that he's not punching me in the face. Because it was the first night in a very long time that I was physically not being injured. And that's the night that I gave my persistence to the Air Force. And I thank the Air Force for giving me a chance. And I told the Air Force in my head, I told the Air Force, I will prove you right, Air Force, that you made the right choice by selecting me as one of your airmen. And that has been my anchor every single time I have faced an obstacle in the military. And that was, I still have to prove the Air Force. And even as I am retired now, I am still proving to the Air Force that I still want to give back to them.
That's a pivotal moment. That's really powerful. Hey, so now let's switch gears, and I'm going to give you both an opportunity to show your scars and show your flaws and be flaw. And I learned this from a speaker by the name of Eric Qualman, and he says, be flawsome. So be awesome in light of your flaws. So thinking of an obstacle and through the lens of persistence, when did you fail at being persistent? When did you go, okay, yeah, we say all these things now in the rear view, but there was a time where I faced something and I could have, but I didn't. What does that look like where people can learn from?
There was, go ahead, Ericka.
I was a medic. My first years of the Air Force, I was a medic and I flew airback. And I think that one of the things that haunts me still today is Somalia. So am I dating myself? Sure. But Somalia is one of those things that came home with me. And we were getting, and maybe, oh my gosh, I don't know if it's Somalia and Iraq and everything combined, but just multiple deployments combined. But as a medic, you really take pride in taking care of people. But there was one time, Mike and Lefford, that there were so many patients and only 5 of us as crew members taking care of them, that there was not enough time to take care of everybody. And to this day, Mike, I don't know if it's a failure, but I feel like it still holds on to my heart. I still remember the sounds that men and women make when they're hurt, that moaning, that uncomfortable. I remember the sound of the plane, and I remember the desperation, if I can use that word, of us being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Of being overwhelmed by war, being overwhelmed by seeing what we were seeing. And I want to say that I froze maybe a little bit, right? Maybe on my first mission, I I'm facing something that I was not expecting, and that is we were expecting 12 patients and we ended up with maybe 85. And
Wow.
and I literally I can still think that it was in slow motion, right? Like, what's happening? Did I react? Of course. Did I do my job? Of course. But to this day, Mike and Lefford, I still think of how my body just physically reacted to what was happening, and someone needed to snap me out of it.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
It kind of reminds me of when you're saying, there's so many, and I'm always one to kind of relate things back to a quote or a story. So forgive me for relating this to something non-military, but this makes a really great point. It's a fictional story of the grandpa and the grandson walking down the beach, and they're looking at all these starfish, and they washed up on shore, and the grandpa's throwing one back, and there's thousands and thousands. And the grandson goes, "Grandpa, why do you keep throwing them in?" He goes, "Well, this guy here can live and he can survive, and I'm throwing him back." And he goes, "But look at all these thousands. You can't save them all." And he goes, "But I can save this one, and I can save this one." So yeah, we as an individual can't change the whole world, but you know what? That butterfly effect, that one person that we can speak encouragement into or change their life by coming alongside them, and like you said, making them feel validated. Boy, that one thing can have a big ripple effect. So I think it's like, give yourself a break. Realize that you can make a difference in this one right here. So that's a really good example. Lefford, what about in your case?
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk to people. That's such honest and purity. But I think back, one of the toughest time for me, it was I gotta be honest, a little bit of arrogance. A little bit of arrogance. It was back in 1998. I was the squadron superintendent for the hospital over at Holloman Air Force Base, Ericka. And I was like the youngest master sergeant superintendent of a squadron. And I don't think it was because of talent. I just think nobody else wanted the position, and I was a new master sergeant. I took it. So I did that, and I did a great job there. And I went over to Korea. When I went over to Korea, I was NCOIC. We were making things happen. I was one of the couple of drug and alcohol counselors in Korea because people had PCS. So there was a while where I was the guy. So I started, to be honest, I was smelling myself. I was feeling really good about myself. So I'm this hotshot master sergeant leaving Osan, Korea, going to Lakenheath. When I went to Lakenheath, there were 5 chief master sergeants in my group. So I went from being a NCOIC superintendent to a small flight in England. And I was like way down in the pecking order. And basically what I said didn't matter, or it didn't feel like it mattered. And for the first time in 20 years of service at that time, I was at the point where I thought about leaving the Air Force. And I shouldn't. I was in England. My wife is British. I had just done great things. I had this awesome job, and I didn't feel worthy because nobody was listening. I was making coffee, pulling patient records, doing all the stuff that I could have done as a staff sergeant. And I almost was ready to retire from the military. And then I got an opportunity to be the deputy IG. And what that whole thing, so you may be asking, what does that have to do with persistence? Persistence is, even when it's not going the way you want to, even when you're not doing everything that you want to do, you got to get the job done, do what's in front of you, do it to the best of your ability, and then make it through. And again, I got to always go back. I was a hard worker, but it wasn't anything that I necessarily did on my own. Somebody showed me the light. I'm a blessed man, Mike, and Ericka, is because every once in a while, when I get to that point where I feel like I'm not living up, somebody will show me a sign. And I guess I'm smart enough to hang on to the signs and go forth. So that was my time. I very nearly failed at that thing. But if not for the grace of God and for good people around me and a wonderful Air Force family, I could have gone the wrong direction with everything going my way. I could have gone
Yep.
the wrong direction. And so I
Wow.
think that is what I hold on to, that there are people that have always been around me. If I open my eyes to look, that is are willing to help me, show me the right direction. And I've just been blessed to be able to identify that.
And the takeaway there is, because that has happened in your career, how can you be that person for someone else? And so I would like to wrap up this talk with, you mentioned a couple times in your career, Lefford, and then Ericka, you can be prepared because I want to hear from you as well. But at that moment in time in England, when you were thinking, what? I'm the man, but now I'm not. Who was that person that came alongside you? And then you mentioned in years previous where there was a time where you were making some bad decisions and someone comes up alongside of you. Who was someone that had a big impact in your life, in your career in those cases? Who were those people? And then maybe just even speaking about them encourages you to maybe, reach out and send that letter, send that text or an email and go, you know what? Something came up in a conversation today, and I just want to say thank you.
Pretty easy. John Gunther was North Dakota. Jim Dickerson was in England. My mother is somebody that's always on the list. I lost her at a young age, but a guy by the name of Joe Guastella, and Gus was a guy that I don't talk about a lot, but he came to our base. He was the vice wing commander, and he did his job, kept his head down, made everything happen. Ultimately, he ended up being a wing commander, and now he's a 3-star. Those three people, not going, I don't even need to go deep. All three of these men and my mother were the people that I want to be persistent with and to go forth, because those three people did so much for the world because they never, ever, ever gave up on their people, on themselves, on the Air Force, or on me. And because I know they held on to me when I didn't feel like holding on to myself, I owe them that. And I think I owe the Air Force the same thing, that I'm always hold on and take care of my Air Force. Even though I'm not wearing the uniform anymore, it's still mine. So I'm going to persistently hang on to that.
Excellent. Awesome. It's neat to be able to look back and through the lens of the rear view and go put that pin in this point and say, this person pin here, this person. Really is neat to hear that. Ericka, what about you in your career, in your life?
I think that I do want to say that, not the same thing as Lefford, but Lefford and I are airmen for life. And yes, we are not wearing the uniform, but we are still airmen. And for me, individuals in my life that gave me that pinpoint that you're talking about were very courageous people, because in my career, I want to say that I have been good. I was a good medic. I was a good NCO. I was a good leader, but I was not the favorite, if that makes sense. Meaning, I took care of business. I took care of that machine that I was talking about before. But I was not a public affairs person that sold myself. And when leadership needed to make decisions to who was going to get the promotion, who was going to move forward, then sometimes a friendship could be stronger than what's best for the organization. And at times, and that's where I say courage comes into play, because there were a couple of commanders that gave me the opportunity to be a superintendent, to become a chief in this amazing Air Force, when they could have selected someone that they were maybe they got along with better. And so that was a huge, huge lesson for me, Mike and Lefford, because then when I was advising 3-star generals, when I had conversations with 4-star generals or any commander or any senior NCO, I would say, don't hire a clone, right? Hire someone that's going to give you a different perspective.
Yeah.
So my pivot points, Mike, are where people gave me a chance because they knew that I was different and that I was going to give a different perspective and I was going to have a different voice at the table.
Wow. Neat. That's a really powerful observation. Well, guys, here's something that I will observe then from this conversation. I feel that when people read this book and understand each one of the letters that stand for the word persistence, passion, excellence, resiliency, and all the words that make this up, they will never look at and think of the word persistence the same way again. And I'll use my final analogy, and I'll relate it to an airplane because you're Air Force. So I've heard this example before, and I know you have as well. But you think of the headwind in life and your personal. It's windy and it's coming against me, and I don't want that. But you know what? It takes that headwind for that plane to go and get the altitude and to take off. So I feel that when you are seeing that obstacle, that headwind, when you can be persistent, that's going to give you the wings to take off and rise up above that. So thank you so much for your talks, for your service, and for what we talked about today. And I really appreciate your time. And when this, make sure that in the show notes that I have the link over to pick this book up when it comes out on Amazon, because this is going to be a book that you read, reread, take notes on, and come back and just make it a handbook for success. So I want to thank both of you so much today.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.